Hello and welcome back to another video with me, Meoni. This time I'm looking at an interview that took place on the French fansite JeuxOnline for Final Fantasy XIV. The fansite had the opportunity to interview Banri Oda and Natsuko Ishikawa, the writers of the Stormblood storyline, giving them an opportunity to ask about the script writing process inside an MMORPG. A link will obviously be in the description, and of course all accreditation goes to finalfantasy14.jeuxonline.info. So Banri Oda is the chief creator of Final Fantasy XIV's major lore, and he is majoritively responsible for the Encyclopedia Eorzea, which is something which I read and quote in various videos myself, which was 300 pages in size. They're referring to him in this article as a bit like the creator of the actual world itself, a god of the storyline of the game world. Natsuko Ishikawa is the chief executive officer of the main screenplay of Stormblood. Before that, she previously worked on part of the scenario of version 2.0, which was everything that concerned the Alexander storyline, the Gears of Change, the Bahamut and Crystal Tower raids, as well as the broom quest of Matoya in Matoya's Cave in Heavensward, which is particularly interesting because I like those quests. When Natsuko Ishikawa was asked what she felt like when she was working alongside Koji Fox and Banri Oda on the writing of a screenplay for Stormblood, and indeed the Encyclopedia Eorzea, she said, "You're right, they're a pair of happy intellectuals. They succeeded in creating stories that blended brilliantly realism and fantasy. I think they inspire members of the development team, myself included, to take a new perspective on a lot of different topics." In regards to Matoya's Cave, they asked if she enjoyed working on that particular questline, and indeed the puzzles. Ishikawa responds, "I'm really happy to hear it. Of course, I would love to work on a similar project again, but it's not something we can do too often. In fact, it's something very difficult to put into place. We need to be clear on how to solve puzzles for the same number of pages in each language. The translation becomes a puzzle to itself, and I am grateful to all the team that helped us in this task." The follow-up to this was what was the actual writing process for Stormblood's main storyline, and if they had written the story piece by piece or all together. Banri Oda takes this question and replies, "Yoshida, Ishikawa and myself, we are together for 3 days to decide together the plot of the story. After that, Ishikawa and I divided the epic into parts, and each wrote the scenario of the areas we were responsible for. Finally, we gathered the elements of the plot and continued to add elements around while smoothing any overlaps." They were then asked what their favourite moment in Stormblood's main storyline was, and if they had a favourite character and why. Oda replies, "If you ask my favourite character, I could spend hours. I find that characters with visible flaws are a bit more human, so I like characters like this rascal of Gyodo. It was really fun to portray younger protagonists, like the characters from Arenvald and Fordola." Ishikawa responds, "My favourite character is the Paramount Susanoo. An imposing body, a massive sword. His way of speaking, what he does, everything was great. He was a really great character to write." The interviewer asks, "Could you give us some more clues about the next events in Stormblood's scenario? Is lasting peace with the Empire really possible?" Oda replies, "I do not want to lose my job, so Motus and Mouth stitched." Next, the topic of killing off characters came up, and they say that Stormblood has been a little lenient with its protagonists for now. Do you attach to the characters that you create? Are you afraid of potentially having to say goodbye to them soon? Oda replies, "It's not as if we're attached to the characters to the point of not wanting to let them die. However, with regard to the death of a certain character, I was opposed to it until the end. He was so loved by the players that I was convinced that it would hurt many people. Nevertheless, Yoshida-san warned us rightly that we could not change so easily what had been decided from the beginning. I think we had 3 meetings to talk about it. It's really great that even now players continue to love the characters who have passed away." You've been writing for Final Fantasy XIV for a long time, and what was the most difficult storyline for you? Oda replies, "In terms of literary creation, I succeed with joy without feeling too much pain. The difficulty comes from the continuous updates and schedules, which are always very tight. I do my best while feeding my brain sugar with tea and chocolate, but because of that, I've really gained weight. Ishikawa responds, "I am the kind of person who appropriates the stress of his own characters. Every time my heart and my body are put to the test. Where the situation is critical, I lose my voice because the fluids in my stomach burn my throat. So it's not really a health walk, but even if I had to write a story without any sad passages or problems, I think my biggest enemy would remain myself." The interviewer asks if you could edit an event that happened in the game since A Realm Reborn, whether you wrote it or not, which one would it be and what would you change? Oda replies, "Rather than rewrite anything, I would rather have the opportunity to develop the directions that have not been explored from a scripting point of view. What is difficult with MMOs is that you cannot really apply the notion of rewriting." JeuxOnline then asks, when you wrote the story for the Crystal Tower, you were confronted with a pre-existing lore in a previous Final Fantasy game. How do you manage to integrate this type of content into the world of Final Fantasy XIV? Ishikawa's response, "It's essential to avoid what fans hate. It's the ultimate factor that influences our decision making, and it's as good for me as it is for the development team, because we're all big fans of the Final Fantasy saga." Stormblood's story revolves around the release of Doma and Alamigo. Why did you choose to tell the same story twice, but in different contexts? Oda replies, "The theme of 3.0 was Ishgard, but the story was not just in Coerthas, and extended to Dravania, Sharlayan, and even Azazlar. Moreover, Alamigo was chosen for the theme of 4.0, but we were worried that the Girabanyan region is not enough in terms of development size for an extension. After discussion with Yoshida-san, it was decided to add the eastern regions, flying over the Garlemald Empire." Most of the time, the quests and stories told in Final Fantasy XIV are optimistic with a happy ending for their characters. Is it a prerequisite for the game to portray stories that are always so happy, and would it be possible to tell a darker and more complex story, as it is the case in TV series like Game of Thrones, without being too violent? Oda replies, "I love the novels on which the TV series Game of Thrones is based, and I have not missed any episodes. The problem, I think, is that few people can understand such a level of subtleties in a scenario. Moreover, in an MMO, the incarnated protagonist is the player himself. The effect of a darker plot would be more powerful than in a novel or a series. When the players felt a huge shock at the death of an important character in 3.0, it was because they considered him a friend. We can therefore consider this feeling as a perspective totally different from what they would feel in a novel or series. Although nothing obliges us to guarantee a happy ending, there is no second chance and multiple endings in Final Fantasy XIV. How do you go about writing the game scenario? Do you adapt the plot to the game system, or is it to game designers to invent features to tell the story?" Oda replies, "The game system takes precedence over anything else. The actions at stake of the players are what allows the progression of the history and the advent of exciting situations. All this is made possible by the gameplay." Ishikawa follows up with, "Although there are times when this scenario seems to be the reason for being, in truth we are trying to design the most interesting video game possible. History is part of this process, but is not the only aspect. And this is true for both MMO development and offline video games." And that wraps up the interview on the French fan site JeuxOnline.info with Natsuko Ishikawa and Banri Oda. And they thank them for their answers, and I thank both the website and of course those people for being in that interview. I pretty much read exactly what was on here. All accreditation, like I say, goes to the website. There will be a link in the description. I thought it was worth reading out because there's some interesting points and there's quite a lot of text to read through, so this is quite helpful, I thought, for people who are on the go. Either way, thank you for watching this video, and I'll see you all next time.